All right, good evening, everyone. Are you all able to hear me if I use the mic in this way? Yes, thank you. Awesome. Hello, I'm Johanna Bergen. I'm a volunteer with Decorah Power and excited to welcome you to our educational event this evening. We are a group of citizens who are really excited about municipal electric utilities, about local control, about finding opportunities for rate relief here for us in Decorah, and are very excited to invite you all to join us on March 4th in voting yes on the referendum. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later this evening, but what I really want to invite you all today is to an evening of learning. So one of the things that I value about city governments in Iowa is our camaraderie and partnership amongst cities. And so there's a lot of learning and cross-sharing of knowledge in towns across our state, and tonight is just one of those examples. So we are really excited. We've been spending the afternoon with our presenters and are excited about the stories they can share with you. So tonight we have Don Kamm, who is the director of the City of Ames Municipal Electric Utility, and my husband's former favorite boss. And Dylan Christopher, who's a foreman with the Ames Electric Utility, and my former classmate at Decorah High School. Proud graduates of a year we will not name unless you tell us we look very young later, and then we might tell you. And we really want to spend about an hour with you this evening talking about how municipal electric utilities run and operate, and what sort of opportunities and partnerships they afford the cities they operate within. We'll have a presentation for about half of the time, and then we'll move to some Q&A. And I'd encourage you all to be thinking about the questions that you might want to get answered that Don and Dylan are specifically suited to answer. We get them here in town just this one evening, and so we want to make good use of their time. And with that, I think we should get started. Yeah.
So she said I was Joel's favorite former boss. Now, if you think about the English and how that works, does that mean that I'm his favorite because I'm a former, as opposed to actual? While she's getting the slides up, so just to make sure that the mics, both mics are working, why do nurses carry red crayons? Why?
So they can draw blood.
Bingo. It must be a dad. That's it. Old dad. Okay. Yeah, my name is Donald Kamm. A little bit of my background. So I've been in the electric utility business for about 40 years. I don't look that old. Started at an investor-owned utility in Minneapolis called Northern States Power. Worked in the transmission planning area. I'm a graduate of University of Minnesota. Worked there about 10 years. Did things like write contracts with Darrellin Power, with SIMPA, which is in Rochester. Did a lot of stuff with municipals and co-ops and things like that. Moved, believe it or not, to Blue Earth, Minnesota.
Yay!
Yeah, I know. So it was good to run into an old friend from Blue Earth, but ran a municipal electric utility there for about 10 years, and I've been at Ames for about 19 years, which is a municipal utility, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Also spent about 28 years in the Air Force Reserve, operating bases, interestingly enough, military bases, so we've got some experience in firefighting and electric and water and wastewater, all that good stuff. I guess I'm gonna advance my own slides or else we won't get very far. Let me tell you a little bit about Ames. Ames is a municipal electric utility. We had a peak load last year of 138 megawatts. And if I'm getting into terms, please ask me to stop and explain. We're a summer peaking utility at 138 megawatts. Winter, we peak at about 100 megawatts. In fact, we just hit that 100 megawatt peak about January 20th when it was really cold this year. We have about 28,000 electric meters. We're what's called vertically integrated, and I'm going to touch a little bit more on that when I talk about utility structure. All that basically means is that we own basically from generation through transmission down to our load. So we have all of those aspects within the municipal, within our world, and there's different kinds of municipal utilities that we'll talk about. Right now, our power supply, we have a waste to energy facility, so we run to burn garbage, run to burn refuse-derived fuel. So roughly 50% of the energy that we serve the city comes from that power plant. Now, we're planning on discontinuing the burning of garbage, and I can talk about that for a half hour, but that's gonna end probably at the end of 26, beginning of 27. We've gotta find new things to do with our garbage. We have about 16% renewables, and I can talk about our climate action plan that the city just passed that we're gonna be deeply involved in. And then about the remaining 34% we buy off of what's called MISO, or the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. And so we're actually in the day ahead in the real-time markets supplying the electricity that comes into Ames. This is where I think we're very similar to Decorah with Luther College here. We have a very strong utility association with Iowa State. We share generation. So they have generation on their campus that they use for heating and, well, they have a district steam heating system for heating and cooling. The waste heat that comes off of that system, they run into generators and power some of the buildings on campus. And then we supply the remaining energy both on a wholesale basis. So in other words, we're buying energy for Iowa State through MISO and we deliver it to the campus. And then they have other loads that are actually retail loads. Jack Trice Stadium is a retail load of the city. The Veterinarian College is a retail load of the city. They're a transmission partner. So we sat down in 1990 and Iowa State says, we don't want to pay for the delivery of our power on an ongoing basis. Can we buy into your transmission system? So in 1990, we signed a contract and they literally can use about 18% of our transmission. It's on a load ratio share. So that they no longer have to pay for wheeling or delivery. They literally own a piece of the greater grid around our city. And as I mentioned, they're both a wholesale and a retail customer of ours. The other thing that's up here, the other thing that's kind of interesting about Ames, you know, many municipals think, well, I'm gonna serve everybody who's in my community. Ames has grown since it was developed or created in 1896, so we're a little over 125 years. My understanding that the water department in Decorah is older than that, like 1882, something in that neighborhood. So you guys have an older utility than we do. But we have 4 electric utilities that serve in the city because we've been growing, okay? Ames is the lion's share. We're about 93% of the load. We also have 2 co-ops that serve electric service territories within the city limits. One is Consumers and the other one's Midland. And kind of like you, I think you have My Energy and you currently have IPL Alliant. And I'll use IPL and Alliant interchangeably from my standpoint, but if you prefer that I use one or the other, I can. So we also have Interstate Power and Light serving electric customers. Interstate or Alliant in this case happens to be our gas supplier for the entire city also. I put up here, so, say again? Oh, so I kind of put up here where the rates are today. This is actually 2023 data. All of the utilities must supply their rate information to the Iowa Utilities Commission. And so Ames is the green bar. I put in Muscatine just because they're kind of very similar to Ames. Also have Consumers, Midland, and Interstate Power. We tend to favor our residential customers. We're municipal owned, so our rates tend to favor homeowners. Small commercial, we're almost as good as Muscatine, almost as low as Muscatine, but better than the others. And then when you start looking at large commercial and industrial, we're fairly even. I think Interstate Power in this particular case is actually a little bit cheaper. Some could say that if you look at the size and breadth of industrial customers, we consider anybody 2 megawatts or greater as an industrial customer, whereas I think Alliant benefits on the very large customers. You can offer very attractive rates for a 20, 50, 100 megawatt load. So, want to talk a little bit about what kind of structures are out there from a utility standpoint. Well, there are investor-owned utilities, okay? What I talk about is vertically integrated. You own the transmission, the highway, the way to deliver it. You can own generation, and then you can own distribution. So they go from creating it, bringing it all the way down to the customer. Mid-American Energy is probably a good example of that in Iowa. You have kind of a unique one, which is generation and distribution. Alliant is kind of like that when they sold their transmission off to ITC, if you're familiar with some of that. I've heard on the street that actually Alliant is looking at purchasing or building new transmission in the future, which is kind of neat. There's a bunch of stuff happening at the state level. From a cooperative standpoint, there are generation and transmission co-ops. Dairyland would be a good example of that. They own generation resources and the transmission to deliver it to their member distribution co-ops. A distribution co-op would be My Energy as an example, Midland over in the Ames area. From a municipal standpoint, we have different types that could be within the municipal world. There's the vertically integrated, again, own transmission, own generation, all the way down to the distribution level. That would be Ames or Cedar Falls Utilities are a couple of examples. A generation and transmission only company would be Wisconsin Public Power, WPPI, and a distribution example would be somebody like Waverly, Osage, something along those lines. Any questions yet as I'm going through this? Is this all, everybody's heard all this before? Maybe, yes, no?
Give an example of a large industrial power consumer in Ames, something.
Thanks for asking. Our largest customer is Amcor. Used to be known as Ball Plastics. It's about a 10 megawatt load. That's our absolute largest customer. We actually have, from an industrial standpoint, I would say we have 8. So Amcor, we have a 3M plant. We have a Hawk chemical plant. Mary Greeley Medical Center is one of our bigger customers. And then VetMed, Iowa State Veterinary Medicine Campus is probably another one of ours. Anybody else? And Danfoss is a big one too. When you look at how are municipal utilities governed, there's not just one size fits all. There's a couple of different types. So you could be designed and built under a city council controls. In other words, that's how Ames is set up. So my boss actually is the city manager, and from the city manager, a lot of our budgets and big projects have to go through the city council to get approved, okay? Some of the neat things about that is we have shared resources. What I mean by that is I don't have to go off and have my own legal staff. I don't have to have my own human resources staff or my own billing staff or my own purchasing staff. We're able to use the city's services, and then we pay part of those costs. So it saves the city on money, and it saves us from having to add that kind of a staff. The other that are out there that exist are independent board controlled. Typically these boards are the members are recommended or appointed by the mayor or by council, but can also be elected. Examples of that are Cedar Falls, and I actually put Blue Earth in there just for you, Mr. Wellington. Oftentimes, and this is doesn't have to be the case, they can typically be more business focused. They can be more singularly utility focused. It's interesting as I go to council meetings and the Parks and Rec person right before me goes up there and says, okay, I want $50,000, I want to put in a child's fountain to play in. And council knows about fountains. I don't know how they do this. They know about fountains, and they sit there and well, you know, should it be that big, or what are you gonna do with the water? And then I get up there and say, I need $1 million to buy a, no, not a bucket truck, but assume it's a bucket truck. And they kind of look at it and they go, well, if the utility needs it, the utility needs it, and so it's interesting. What we've done, because our utility has grown to be somewhat complex, is in 1982, council created a board, a specific board of city people that become an advisory board. So on major things like budgets, on projects, things that council wants more in-depth study, they send it to this board that then works with us on a month-by-month basis. We just finished budgets, sitting down with, it's called URAB. I didn't come up with the name, Electric Utility Operating Review Advisory Board. And we just finished budgets with them, and then we took those to the city council for approval, which should get approved in March. But they've asked the board right now to look at something called the value of solar. The city wants to increase the amount of retail or residential owned solar, and have asked the board, how can the electric utility encourage, sponsor, increase the amount of solar that people can put on their homes? And I could talk a little bit more on that too. It's some really cool stuff that we're gonna be doing here in the coming months. So it's a way that this board then can go into the deep dive and then be that advocate for the residents, and then bring that information to council. The other thing I'm gonna mention, because this is oftentimes a misnomer, electric utilities do not use 1 cent of tax dollars. All of the money that we use to buy trucks, to buy equipment, it's all based into the rates that people pay for their electricity. So there's no cross sharing. In fact, we as an electric utility actually pay what's called a pilot, payment in lieu of taxes, to the city. So as part of the revenue that we earn, rather than paying taxes, we pay money back to the city to help offset some of the general operating costs of that. No matter what kind of a utility that you have, there are basically 3 major components that are needed to supply electricity to the home down the street, okay? If you become a municipal electric utility, you're gonna have to get transmission service from someone. That could be ITC in this case, which is close by. I think Dairyland is close by. I'm not sure who delivers to My Energy, but you have to arrange for service on the transmission system. The second piece of it is, whatever your load is, you have to have the capability to meet that obligation at all times. In other words, you have to have capacity, and I'll touch on what that means in a minute. And then from an energy standpoint, it's a continual, if somebody goes over there and changes a light switch, the draw of electricity is gonna change instantaneously. There's gotta be something that's bringing more energy in when lights come on, and turning energy off when lights don't. Sounds complicated, but it's actually really, really easy these days. So from a transmission standpoint, transmission itself is like the interstate highway of electricity. So it's the high voltage lines, typically 69,000 volts and higher. Ames happens to have 2 161,000 volt lines that interconnect us, ironically, to SIPCO, Central Iowa Power Cooperative, through ITC. We also have an interconnection, 2 interconnections with Mid-American Energy, that one's at 69,000 volts, and one's at 161. Let's see. The way that's built, if you want to get into the details, is whatever our load is on the system at the time that the greater system peaks. So if our loads are right in sync with everybody else around us, we pay our ratio share of the transmission cost to use the wires. If our load happens to be a little higher at some other time, we benefited from that due to the diversity of the loads that are onto the system. Some of the major transmission providers in the area are Mid-American Energy in our neck of the woods. ITC is right outside of Ames. Darrell Power also owns a lot of transmission in the area. So an interesting thing, and I don't know if this comes up in your situation, but in some ways we're competitors, but in some ways in the utility industry, we are collaborators. Ames right now is in the process of, we're going to own a portion of an ITC substation. Alliant will have a piece, ITC will have a piece, and we will have a piece. It's called Prairie View Industrial Park Substation. So all three of us are gonna own a piece of that substation. So it doesn't have to be, well, this is mine and this is yours. There's a ton of collaboration that happens within the utility industry. If you become a municipal electric utility, you have an opportunity. You do not have to invest in the transmission system. Without going into another 10-minute speech on that, what it basically means is a utility can use the wires and you pay for it, okay? The other opportunities, there's always new wires getting built. And municipal utilities, if this new bill in the state house passes, called rights of first refusal, and if people start scaring you with that, it's not a big deal, but municipal electric utilities together with the other major electric utilities will have rights to own and invest in transmission. Why do that? Because you have a guaranteed rate of return. What that guaranteed rate of return does is, I'm still paying for the use of the wires, but then the utility gets money back from everybody using the wires, and I could take that money, pay off the debt on the line, and use it to lower my rates for my customers. And all utilities do this. All utilities get the same investment, the rate of return on the transmission facilities. Way off in the weeds, I know, but my geeky head works that way. Mentioned opportunities for partnerships. Like I said, we're jointly, well, ITC is building it. We're not gonna build it, but we're gonna own a piece of it because it makes good business sense, good financial sense for us to own a piece of this substation. And the substation will benefit Ames because it strengthens our reliability. We have very good reliability, but another transmission line coming in strengthens it even more. We're actually benefiting ITC, and we're benefiting Alliant. Alliant wants to serve this industrial park. If they just build the one line that they want to build, they're hanging a large load off of a single line. The three of us working together, we're going to be supporting each other. Again, it's where we're working collaboratively for the greater good of serving all of our customers. Am I running out of time yet? How am I doing? Hurry up. Okay. All right. Just gotta, raise 5 minutes. Okay. Got 3. Meeting your generation capacity. I mentioned that you have to be able to serve your load. Easy to do. You can build and own. If you want to own wind turbines, you can own wind turbines. You want to own solar, you can own solar. If you want to put in Caterpillar engines, all that type of stuff, you have that ability. You can contract for it. There are many people that sell capacity out there. Ask me after. We can talk capacity. You can join a municipal or a co-op power agency, and they'll provide all of that for you. Worst case comes to worst, MISO has a yearly auction. It's actually seasonal auction to supply capacity. Thing with the auction is you pay whatever the price clears at. It's not something I enjoy doing. The other thing I wanted to mention is generation has different value depending upon the fuel, all right? A thermal unit, something that burns gas, natural gas, diesel, something like that, typically has roughly a megawatt for megawatt value. Okay, so if you put in a 10 megawatt unit, it typically has 10 megawatts of value. When you look at wind and solar, they look at how much wind is blowing at the time of the peak. So wind right now is valued at about 22%. So you put in 10 megawatts, you only get 22% of the 10 megawatts in terms of capacity. Again, I'm geeking out. Energy, if you want to be more green, you can either enter into contracts and get what's called a power purchase agreement, or you can get into ownership and literally own the panels. Ames currently has a contract both for wind and solar, and we're looking at ownership on solar and ownership on wind before 2030. You can do what are called bilateral contracts. They're kind of a little passé. People don't do that anymore, where I can call up Daryl and say, I want to buy 20 megawatts, and we can work out a deal. The MISO market, and this is what makes, if you think that running a utility or municipal utility is scary, MISO has made it infinitely better since I got into the business several years ago. In a nutshell, the way it works, I do a load forecast of what my load's going to be tomorrow, hour by hour, okay? I submit that to MISO and say, this is how much energy I need. They come back, every utility does this, Daryl does this, Mid-American, Alliant, everybody puts that into the market, and it comes back and it looks at the cost of that next generator to serve it. That comes out and they send me an email about 4 o'clock and say, here's what your prices are each and every hour the next day. Let's say I ask for 20 megawatts and my load, heaven forbid, is 21.3. Well, there's a real-time market that readjusts the price every 5 minutes. So that 1.3 is then provided on a real-time basis. We get the bill once a week, we pay weekly bills, and it's not like, oh, you've overscheduled or underscheduled. The system takes care of itself. It's actually quite easy. Okay, what ifs, all right? Decorah becomes a municipal utility, a storm comes through, and you're just hanging out there, and who's gonna come and help us? We have a strong mutual aid system. Ames, like Cedar Falls during the derecho, lost 100% of its power back in the day. We had 9 other municipal electric utilities that showed up. Some of those municipal electric utilities only had 2 or 3 linemen for their entire city. And still, they brought their trucks, they brought materials, they brought their people, and they helped. Sometime later, Corn Belt, a co-op, had similar problems. We actually offered staff to help. They were covered, but between municipals and cooperatives and even the investor-owned utilities, when a storm happens, it doesn't matter what kind of utility you are. First and foremost, you get the lights on for everybody. It doesn't matter whose customers are whose. But storms are one of those things where you do not, it's not a turf battle at all. Staffing, there is a statewide apprenticeship program. There's actually a field that we collectively as municipals own in Ankeny, and DMAC provides an apprenticeship program there. And there's shared resources, both short and long term, that can happen either between municipal and municipal, co-op and municipal, municipal and co-op, and things like that. The other things, regulatory issues. Ooh, the government. It's actually not that bad. We have, on the national level, American Public Power Association that looks at what's happening on the state side, on the federal side. Iowa Association of Municipal Utilities works on behalf of the state side. I don't know if anybody has questions on other what ifs, would be happy to talk about. Costs of a municipal, okay? This is not an easy decision, completely understand that. You have to think about staffing, potentially have to think about staffing, short and long term. Funding and financing, how are you gonna pay for it? Billing, you have a water department today. I understand it's like postcards. You may have to look at a more advanced billing system than postcards. We actually send out letters, but we have an online system. You can pay by credit card. We actually get a lot of walk-ins, which are it's interesting actually. You have to think about state and federal regulatory requirements. It's like, oh, how do we do this? How do we do that? the key is this has been done so many times with so many cities, you're not alone. There are people out there, Ames has been out there, we can help you, the state association. It's not that scary, we've been doing it for over 125 years. And there is a potential for higher costs. If the city, like in Ames itself passed a climate action plan. So they came to us and said, by 2030, you'll be at 50%, by 2050, you'll be at 100%. So now as a utility, I'm starting to plan in wind and solar. In fact, in my budget, in my 5-year budget, I've got $50 million I'm putting in there to buy wind. So we do what the city is desiring us to do. What are the benefits? The biggest foot stopper here is you have direct control, okay? You have a focus and purpose of the utility. We try to balance, and it's not equal, it's not like a triangle where we're dead center, but we're balancing sustainability, we're balancing reliability, and we're balancing affordability. And I personally want reliability as number one, affordability as a close number two, and sustainability as a number three. I will not say, forget it, we're just gonna all do green. I don't care if people's lights go out, that's not, in my opinion, the way to operate a utility. It's those first two, but bring in sustainability, knowing it's gonna cost a little bit more. For us, I can't begin to explain alliance rates. I know there's a lot of, within the rates you have a lot of extra fee structures. I like them simple. On our bill, electric rate, there's a customer charge that pays for the meter and some fixed infrastructure and an energy charge. That's it. There's nothing else on it. For our commercial customers, there may be a demand charge. That's it. Nothing else on it. You can start looking at more advanced rates if you want to encourage your customers to use power at different times. And that's called like time of use rates and stuff like that. Local decision making. You think that it's easy, if you think that it's easier for a council to raise rates than it is for the Iowa Utilities Commission, trust me, the work that we go through, the last rate increase we had in Ames was in 2017. In my budget this year, I'm asking for a 1.5% rate increase. So it's been 8 years to get a rate increase into the system. And that 1.5% is to help pay for green energy. I said, council, if you want to go green, I need a little more money. So I think they're going to pass that. So I'm getting 1.5% to invest in renewables. Community reinvestment. And I know Alliant does a good job at this. They come to our council meetings and say, hey, we're a local presence, and here's some things that we're doing within your community. I think as a municipal-owned electric utility, you can do that and more. But I will honestly admit, Alliant does do some good local community reinvestment. Reliable service, okay? All of our linemen live within, 30 minutes or less. And what we do with our linemen is what we call our number one. They take a vehicle home. So if they get a call, Dylan is not running to the shop. He goes straight to that spot, checks it out. If he needs help, he has the ability to call in people to help him. He's not, what do I do and who do I talk to? He's got all of the authority to get the lights on. And then we talk about it the next day. Is there a better way to do it? Or typically it's attaboy, thank you. And there is a potential for lower costs. In Ames right now, like I said, our residential costs are lower than Alliance. And it's interesting, the mayor is on Alliance system in Ames, and he keeps telling me, can you run an extension cord? I keep telling him no. That is the end of my slides. Mentioned before, Dylan is one of our line foremen. He grew up here in Decorah. I encourage you, if you have questions about what it like to be a line worker or work for a municipal, or why does he do that and not work for somebody else, feel free to ask him. I'm available for questions too. Sorry, I apologize if it took too long.
So Dylan, I'm going to ask you the first question, just as a heads up. We'll take questions from the audience now for about a half an hour. There are several Decorah Power volunteers in the audience that are available to stay a little longer and get in the weeds if you're interested. And again, just a reminder, we'd love for you to prioritize asking questions to Don and Dylan while they're here and in town. So Dylan, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about why you choose to work for the city of Ames versus other providers.
I started at Ames, I don't know, almost 9 years ago. I didn't really realize when I was applying there I was actually going to like it like I do. It's nice to serve the city as a whole. You know, you get to see the same people on a regular basis. You get to know, the local citizenry. It's a very good population down there. We have a lot of good people, just like Decorah. I feel like we're very similar people between the two cities, the whole structure of the cities as a whole. So I chose it over Alliance and the RECs. I used to work for an REC. Like I said, initially I didn't know why I chose it, but now that I'm there, I just like being part of that, of the city as a whole. I feel like we get a good voice in what's going on compared to the other places. We get treated with respect by the city and the population quite well. I know I have people that work for other utilities, and it's not necessarily always the same, and you're not, where they serve, they serve one town, we serve one town, they might serve 10, you're not always a familiar face, and I think people like to see that stuff.
One thing I'll add to that too is, so our line department was union for years and years and years and years. And about 2 years ago, they voted not to maintain the union. I think the linemen were a little worried, what's the city gonna do to us, but I think you're pretty happy.
Yeah, touching on that, it's generally a lot of linemen out and about are part of a union. Very well could be if you guys start one up here. It's not scary to work with either one of them. As he's saying, we found out in a hurry that the city treats us the same as it did before, if not even better, actually. So union, no union, it's completely good both ways. I wouldn't be worried about that one bit.
What kind of training is needed for being a line person, and is it hard to fill positions?
So generally, you can go about it in a couple different facets. I went to Northwest Iowa Community College, Sheldon, Iowa, got a year's worth of experience in that program there, and then I finished my apprenticeship through an REC. So some people can start off just with a base apprenticeship with a company, right off the ground, and build their way up, and then some of us go to school and start it off, get a little experience through that. Can it be hard to hire some people? Depending on the current situation. If we had quite the turnover with retirement and stuff like that, as the baby boomer generation went in and out, and they were in a huge hiring crisis that we were short when I was going through line school. So that kind of does its normal things like any other business, right? It goes through its retirement phases and comes right back with the younger crowd. So I'd say we're kind of in the middle of all that right now. I think there is jobs available, but there's need for keeping guys training and learning. So right now, I guess everybody that I know that wants a job has a job and has opportunities to find elsewhere if they want to. So why choose here again? Why choose Decorah if they start their own electric utility? Is again, you get that community with a small town, and you get a lot of freedom and with who you work for. So there's just a lot a lot of extra good benefits, you know, when you work for cities and stuff like that, and there's so much that goes into that, you know, our hours, I work personally 7 to 3, so a straight 8 with a 20-minute lunch, right? So we'll get time, you know, all that time from 3 o'clock on that I get to go be with friends, family, whatever, you know, you get to have a good life. You got kids, you know, get off at 3 o'clock, they're off at school around that time, right? You get to see them for the entire day that they can be home or whatever you want, you know, so there's just a lot of that stuff that you might not get elsewhere.
Dylan, Don mentioned when the derecho hit, and it caused a big outage in Ames, of course, like it did in Cedar Rapids and other places. And you guys had other REC, you know, crews come in. Can you talk about that experience a little bit from your perspective, how that all worked and how it came together?
Yeah, so generally with mutual aid, from my experience, it's usually municipals help municipals, RECs help RECs, investor-owned help investor-owned, and then you get like contractors that can do all the above. Yeah, so what happens for us is when they call in help from other utilities, usually we split up as a group. So I took a crew from Cedar Falls and I managed them, and we ran through our section of town with lines. And then we had the same thing with the rest of the crews from the city. So we have, like I said, 9 guys. I think we ended up splitting up with 6 different crews probably throughout us, and then we had a couple in between us that we can kind of manage and keep an eye on. So it's very, very useful. There's a lot of knowledge around the state amongst other linemen within the cities. They did a fantastic job for us. I mean, some of them got caught up in doing some of the heaviest stuff because, you know, we have to be able to keep everybody else safe by knowing our system and bird dogging them. So they got stuck doing some of the heavy stuff, but we could, you know, you can't necessarily do that without help from around the state, and everybody's willing to jump in and do it. That's just part of the type of people we are. You know, we got into this job for that purpose. Like, we love serving people with power. We love being reliable and dependable, and we get the chance to go do that with other people in other people's communities. I mean, we ask for it. I mean, we've asked for it many times, saying, "Okay, can we go help these guys?" Like, we love it, and we love it in return as well.
Is there a reliability factor that's assigned to a MEU or a investor-owned utility where you actually have a percentage of reliability? Is there such a factor?
So within the industry, there's these factors called SAIDI, CAIDI, things like that. So yeah, we have reliable indices that we publish. Right now it's on a yearly basis. We're gonna move that up onto a quarterly basis. One of the things that we do with that is it allows us to say, okay, what caused our outages? How long were they? In Ames, our 2 biggest problems, one is the dreaded squirrel. We get more outages from squirrels than anything else. So one of the things the line crew crews are tasked with is, if they're out there, they find something that had squirrel damage, we have the ability to do animal guarding. That's one of our focuses. Another has been contractors, interestingly enough. We'll go out, and all utilities are the same. You've got to market, you've got to call in one call, you got to market, but still, we get contractors that kind of come in and either hit something or touch something. Those are our biggest problems. But yeah, reliability, we're at the 99.92% in terms of system reliability. I could dig up the SAIFI and CAIDI numbers if you guys want to see them, but Alliant has them, we have them, and we'd be happy to share them with anybody. You want to say something on that?
We cover roughly 65,000 people when the students are in. We have 9 people. We have 9 linemen that cover that many, and we are able to maintain very high satisfactory rate amongst customers and reliability rate. So you get good employees, knowledgeable. You know, we can handle a lot. We don't need a ton of us to handle a lot. Decorah would not be very hard to handle in this situation. Pretty easy to take care of.
To sort of extend on that, you say you've got 9 line workers, what other staff, administrative positions do you have in that system overall?
For our part in electric distribution, we have 9 linemen. We have some substation guys, 4 of them that do a little bit of reliability in there. They handle a lot of the smaller, intricate stuff. When I was at REC, I did every facet. So I did metering, I did substation, I did line work, I did warehouse. You know, we know how to do all of it. Places can break that down into smaller groups like we have. It's not necessarily a full necessity, so that's just something you can look at too, depending on how you guys, how everything's set up around. So, like I said, we have warehousemen. Do we count the street light worker?
Sure.
So we have a couple guys that do just fully only do like street lights and low voltage stuff.
You have a locator.
We have one locator, locator in our office as well, so a couple purchasing people, I suppose.
We have a manager and assistant manager.
Anybody else in your
Then we got the manager and assistant manager. That's just on the distribution side. Within the electric department, we have 81 positions, roughly 40 of them are in the power plant because we're running generation constantly. We have our own engineering department, but we'll send that out to some of the heavier stuff we'll send out. We've got a couple people that do customer service, the rebates, things like that. We've got, because we're buying our own energy, I've got a group of people that are buying our natural gas, buying and selling our energy, things like that. But 81 total positions for utility of 138 megawatts. Sir up front here.
What,
Yeah, that's you, sir.
okay, what percentage of your lines are underground,
Oh,
roughly?
okay, all right. You know that one? All right, so, a lot of our older neighborhoods are still above ground, and after the derecho, we did talk about undergrounding all those. And when we told the neighborhoods, okay, because they're normally in the back, we're gonna run them right down the front. That's where all those beautiful old trees are. We said some of those trees may die. They said, leave them in the back up above. But, I wanna say maybe, and this is a guess, I'd have to check it out, probably, everything's been going underground for a long time. I wanna say maybe 35%. About 35% is still overheads in the backyards, and probably about 65% is underground, and 100% of our transmission is all overhead. That helps.
Do you have much limestone you have to dig through to put stuff underground?
No, we do not.
Do you wanna talk about?
That's, I know people get worked up about some of that stuff. We're tradesmen, we're hands-on mechanical people. You give us a piece of equipment, teach us it for a week, we'll be teaching guys next week how to use it. That stuff's not a big deal for us.
Look, or go to
On your generation, what's driving you to shut that down? And how has that impacted your rates in the past, and how will not having it impact your rates in the future?
Oh, generation. All right. We have been in a waste energy operation for 50 years. 50 years ago, it was coal and paper. Easy to burn, easy to take care of, everything was fine. It was actually cheaper resources. Come 2008, when the economy went to crap, basically there was so much free energy out there, our plant became more expensive to run than it did buying off the market. So right now, it is still more expensive to generate. We switched from coal to natural gas in 2017, and garbage has changed. Garbage is more garbage now. It's so much plastics and stuff like this. One of the things that we learned is when you burn plastics in a coal environment, it's okay. The ash kind of absorbs some of the chlorines that come out of that. This is the chemistry department, right? Absorb some of the chlorines. Switching to natural gas, you're adding water and you're taking out all of the ash. So we're creating this environment that's just eating through our boiler tubes. Terrible. So we're spending a ton of money on boiler tubes. And it's more expensive to run that plant than what we can run with new reciprocating engines that we're gonna buy, or with wind and solar. We're in a hotbed of wind where Ames is. Oftentimes, energy prices in the real-time market are negative. People are paying us at 2 in the morning to take the energy, at 5 in the morning, at 10 in the morning. So when we shut it off, we're gonna switch more of our energy from wind, solar, and the open market. We're gonna keep that unit. That unit is there for capacity reasons, like I mentioned before. And there's times when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, we're gonna turn those units back on, typically in the summer, and run them when they are so we're getting the best of both worlds. It's a completely paid for plant. One of the things we gotta look at is staffing. Right now I've got staffing because we're running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is part of the change that we're gonna be dealing with, moving into that. Did I answer your question, sir? Back here in front, sir. You had your hand up again.
Without disclosing too much, I'm just curious to find out what a lineman roughly makes.
It's public.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they publish ours
Oh,
yearly,
yeah.
so, that depends on where you're at, who you work for. I think our base salary is somewhere around the 95,000. And then after overtime, it can be, depends on how much overtime you get, you can make up to 130. I need to disclose mine. Yeah, but if, I know that investor owned down by us, Reliant, I know plenty of guys that are working there, and, you know, they're pulling in more than that, but, you know, customers are paying for that, so.
The way our pay structure is set up is, we always have 2 guys on call. They are guys, but yes, could be women too, but we have 2 people on call. So they're paid 2.5 hours to carry the pager, be close to home, have the truck, so that they can respond in 30 minutes or less. Those 2.5 hours can be used as comp time, you can pay it out at the end of the year, so there's other things there. Overtime, if you get called out after hours, that's a minimum 2-hour call, and then you get time and a half, and then on Sundays it's Sundays it's double time. So there's opportunities, or there's other costs that, because frankly, they're out in the worst weather, and I would rather have them out when it's raining or cold and people's lights are out than that's why they do that job. It's tough. Sir.
A 2-part question. Can you talk a little bit from the manager perspective, the difference between how the cost of an MEU works versus investor-owned utility, and, you know, the investor-owned utility has to provide for the shareholders where an MEU doesn't, but you've got a more direct responsibility to the city and to the city coffers. But also in terms of, second part of the question is what that means for revenue generating back to the city by having your own MEU versus if you were buying power directly from an investor-owned utility. Kind of a complicated question.
You actually kind of sort of covered it. So an investor-owned utility by its nature is an investor-owned utility. Mid-American is owned by Berkshire Hathaway. So the money the excess, the profit, they have a profit that they make goes back through Berkshire Hathaway. You know, Alliant is a for-profit company, and there is money that they make that they have shares. You can buy shares and be an owner that way. So there is that piece of it. That's one thing a municipal electric utility doesn't have. It doesn't have shareholders, it has customers, it has owners. The owners would be the people that it's serving. So our rates are designed somewhat differently, that we're not having to make that return on for shareholders. From from our standpoint, as I mentioned before, we benefit by being part of the city because we get to use some of the city resources. The city benefits because we're picking up some of those costs. Some of the costs that are in your tax dollars are being offset by some of the, again, we do not use one single tax dollar. It's the rates, the revenue from running the utility that offsets the city attorney's pay, the city manager's pay, human resources, purchasing, all of that type of stuff. So if that's what you're referring to. There are some benefits in doing that.
Can you quantify that?
Can I quantify that?
Yeah,
So
how much money goes back to the city of Ames because of the electrical utility?
yes, so today, so we have what's called a payment in lieu of taxes, okay? So our pilot, or payment in lieu of taxes, is based on 5% of our gross assets. So it's approximately $2.4 million a year on a budget of about $77 million. So the electric department right now is about $77 million, and we pay roughly $2.4 million back to the city. In addition to 15% of the city manager's salary kind of flows up and that type of stuff. We do not have franchise fees in Ames. It's something that, with the state of the state government, they're looking at possibly in trying to alleviate some of those other problems. Sir, you had your hand up.
Yeah, can you talk about your current net metering program and what the change to a value of solar might look like?
Dang good question. I'm glad you asked that. Okay. So within Ames, so let's talk a little bit. So it's the investor-owned utilities under the Iowa Utilities Commission that has a certain requirement on solar. That's not to say that we dislike solar or want to discourage solar. Today, what our program looks like is you could put as much solar as you want in your home. There's no size limit in our program. This is a little bit different than Alliance. However, we don't have what I would call as a pure net metering, which means I'm gonna push a little energy out into the utility, you hold on to it, and then I'm gonna take it when the sun goes down. The way our program works is you get a $100 rebate when you first put it in per kW, and then any excess energy, and it's different for each class of customers, I believe it's 7.2 cents in the summer for excess each and every hour. So if you push out at noon, we'll pay 7.2 cents for that. And then in the winter, it's like 6.5 cents. That's the program that we're doing today. What we're about to propose to council, so you guys are getting firsthand, this hasn't gone to council yet, but it went through our URAP board. People came to us and said, you know, getting this money, that's fine, and getting the energy and all that kind of stuff. We really need the money up front. I mean, help us lower that initial capital cost. So in addition to the 30%, unless President Trump took it away, and the 30% tax credits that's in the IRA, Ames is now gonna start paying $600 per kW upfront for everything installed. But then the energy we buy back, so that it's a wash, if you will, is gonna be equal to whatever the price is that we pay for energy to supply our other customers. So that way, and maybe it's 4 cents. So if I can buy on the open market, if I can buy from MISO for 4 cents, I would rather buy your energy for 4 cents. But you get all this money up front, and that works out to 15 to 20% of the capital cost. So federal government gives you 30% and we give you 20, you got half of your solar panel paid for up front. And then everybody who's on our old program is grandfathered unless they want to switch. So that's the kind of, we currently have about 1.7 megawatts of retail solar, 214 different systems ranging from 3 kW to 312. And we got right now about 6 going through the process. In fact, our little community theater is gonna put 23 kW. I'm on their board, and I said, you gotta put some solar on. So we're gonna be putting solar on our community theater building. Great slope. Sorry, I get excited about solar, so it's good. We like solar. You would think that as a utility, is it competing with you? But the more solar we can get our community put on, We're also looking at, utility scale solar, looking at a couple of 2 megawatt projects, and I'd like to do 20 megawatts. So if anybody knows where there's some land that I can put 20 megawatts, that's like 100 acres. That's a lot of solar. Sir?
You talked about your staffing, but I'm curious if you can say anything about the staffing of a distribution-only MEU in a smaller city like Waverly or New Hampton or whatever.
I will use Blue Earth Light and Water because I know Blue Earth Light and Water. So, at Blue Earth Light and Water, they're probably about a 8-9 megawatt utility. Jolly Green Giant, if you ever drive down I-90, all that good stuff, they got a Seneca canning right there. They ran their utility on the line worker side with 3 people. And lights didn't really go out in Blue Earth Light and Water, did they? All right, so you can do it with 3.
Plus office staff.
And I don't know how you're set up, but there's economies of scale with your existing water department. All right, again, I would look at a new billing system. Postcards just don't cut it when you're trying to do that. I can't say you may not have to beef that up. I don't know how Decorah is set up. The other thing is you've got entities around, whether short-term or long-term, that for like a My Energy or something like that to say, hey, we're serving, because part of your city is served by My Energy, right? So you look a lot like Ames, where you got My Energy here and Alliant here. I'm thinking something can be worked out, short-term, long-term, maybe it's 10 years as you look at what is it gonna take in staffing, if you go that route, all right? I know you got a vote coming up and but the beauty, in a nutshell, there's nothing about municipalization that should scare you. If you get to a point where the numbers don't work, the numbers don't work. You can't argue with that. But at least you can look at it with good information, and you can either say, yep, it works, or no, it doesn't. And I will be the first to say, there are a couple of municipals in the state, one that was a gas municipal, that couldn't run their system safely. And we, the association, said, you gotta sell that system. You're gonna hurt somebody. It's like 500 or less people. They sold that utility, I think, and if there's somebody from Alliant here, maybe they'll say it's Alliant, but I thought it was the Mid-American, don't quote me. And there was another municipal, very, very small, maybe you've heard about it, and you don't have the staff, and you're not doing it safely, don't do it.
Would you talk about your relationship with IUCs?
She's asking if I have a relationship with the IUC. I have a lovely relationship. We're like kissing cousins. What's the IUC? All right. Used to be called for years and years and years, but they wanted to raise. They used to be called the IU Utilities Board. You can erase that part. The IU Utilities Board is under the state. It's 3 individuals that basically all utilities have some work with them. They became recently the Iowa Utilities Commission. I don't know why they changed their name. And basically, so for example, if I wanted to build a line from Decorah to Ames, I, as a utility, doesn't matter what kind, I have to go before the Iowa Utilities Commission and justify that power line, because we're going across people's properties. Every utility has to do that. The biggest difference with the IUC between a municipal and an investor-owned utility, my rates are driven by what my residents, I keep saying my, I apologize, but I'm very passionate about our utility. The rates are driven by the city and by the city council. I don't have to take rates to get them approved by the Iowa Utilities Commission. Investor-owned utilities, that is their checks and balances on rate increases, that has to go there. Each year, municipals, co-ops, and the investor-owned utilities have to show up before the IUC and say, are you ready for the winter? Are you ready for the summer? What should we be worrying about as a commission? You know, have you got enough generation? Do you have enough transmission? Or what's your fuel source? Do you have enough coal sitting on the ground for those that have that? We all have to do that. There are rules and there are sections of the rules within the IUC that talk about this is what an investor-owned utility must do, this is what a cooperative utility must do, and this is what a municipal utility must do. So I know them very well. I have a great relationship with the IUC. Sir?
If you had to value your system at today's prices, pretend you're an investor-owned utility right now, you had to value your system and go to be an MEU, and you did it with 100% financing, could you pay for yourself?
That is a very interesting question. Well, I'm gonna first tell you a little side story, because a good friend of mine at Mid-American Energy came to my boss and says, I'll buy your utility for $100 million. And he came to me, and my boss came to me, and we were talking about this in the car ride over. And I got a little bit nervous, because he just asked that. Bill Furman no longer works there, by the way, which is good. And I said, well, Steve, I said, if he offers you $1 billion, take it. Which they kind of dropped it. Back to your question. So right now, the value of our system is roughly $350 million. That's all of our generation. That's all of our transmission. That's not counting, you know, book value of future customers and all of that type of stuff.
What if you took out the generation and just dealt with the rest of it? Because we don't have generation.
Okay. It's a little, I will answer your question. It's a little bit unfair, and let me explain why. Mention that we're burning garbage. We spend about $13 million burning garbage that we don't have to. Okay. So when we stop burning garbage, I'm gonna take that 13 million and I'm gonna spend it on a $100 million bond to pay for all of my new generation that I need and not raise rates at all. Raise rates 1.5% to add a little bit of green. So I can borrow without touching our rates, $100 million, easy, easy, easy. Transmission right now, it's a very good question. You must be from a line. No? Okay. Because that is a very good question.
That is.
Huh? Oh. So from our transmission standpoint, I am thinking, so we have what's called the annual transmission revenue requirement, which is what we use to value a transmission system. All utilities do that if you're in the MISO footprint. Our transmission right now is valued at about $60 million. Our distribution is probably valued at, let's say $100 million. We would have to borrow $100 million. Could we do that? Because of our unique situation, we could do that without raising rates. But borrowing $100 million would be an expensive activity. So I can look at it from an Ames standpoint. I apologize, I can't necessarily look at it from a Decorah standpoint. Maybe there's somebody else.
It sounds like you've got a very successful place. I mean, you're a very successful utility, so you have the ability to do that.
We've been around a long time, and I'm just tired of burning garbage. I want to get back and be a utility and not a garbage burner.
Okay, can I take point of privilege for last question, and then we'll do some wrap up? How do Ames citizens benefit from having an MEU? What are you most proud of?
Better repeat the question.
Okay, so she's asking, how do citizens of Ames most benefit from having an electric utility? I think a couple of things that touch on me. So I live in the city of Ames. Dylan lives in the city of Ames. So I'm seen at the local fairway. I'm seen at the local baseball game and things like that. And this could be said for many utilities, but by living and working in the same place, people can come up to me and they can tell me the things they like and they can tell me the things that they don't like. At the same time, and this is again a military background, but I'm extremely proud of the people that we have working in there. And we're out there in the middle of the worst storm and I get a phone call the next morning saying, hey, I don't know how you did it, but you got my power back on, that means something to me, and I appreciate that. I didn't have that when I worked for Northern States Power. I was a guy that sat in a tower, designed stuff. Nobody knew I worked for Northern States Power, nothing like that. You know, and I'm assuming, I'm not criticizing Alliant, I'm assuming you've got local people here too that people can touch and grab, but for being a member of the community and working for it, it's not big government controlling, it's the people down the street that knows that they can come and talk to me if they've got a problem or if they're not happy with what we're doing.
From my standpoint on that, we work with electricians daily, or weekly, sometimes daily, and the ease of working with us versus a lot of the local investor owns is very, very voiced by these people. They can call us in the morning as our day starts. We can be there within an hour to do what they need to do and help out. It's very, very localized. We're right there, you know, we're work for this town only. So as far as contractors go, they love to work with us versus anybody else in the area, stuff like that. We're very easy to work with the local community, local contractors, businesses, everybody.
Switching to the guard. Thank you so much for Don and Dylan's time with us this evening. And thank you all for coming and attending this educational event with us and for caring about your community. One of the reasons I love to live in Decorah is the fact that we are a group of community members who get loud about the things that we care about, and we engage when we have concerns, and we provide solutions and strategies rather than complaints. So thank you all for helping make this a really great place to live. You are my captive audience for just a couple more minutes, so I am going to use that. We would like to encourage you to vote yes on March 4th for an opportunity. The question on the ballot is, should the city of Decorah establish a municipal electric utility? And I think the answer is yes, because a yes vote on March 4th gives us the opportunity to get data and facts from the IUC that will allow us to figure out if this is a good idea. In the state of Iowa, we don't get to vote ever for who our utility provider is. That is a state-made decision for us, and we pay the electric provider who runs electrons to our house. But on March 4th, we have the opportunity to ask our city council to ask the state if there might be a better option for ratepayers in our community. So join me and many others in this room in voting yes. Spread the news with your neighbors. Let us know if you have questions. We'd love to answer them. Quick notes about voting. Early voting for this election starts on February 12th, which feels very soon if you're looking at a calendar. You can vote early at the Winnebago County office, at the auditor's office, Monday through Friday, regular business hours between February 12th and March 4th. If you would like an absentee ballot, your request needs to be received in the auditor's office by February 17th. Quick note, if you don't have children, you don't think about the school schedule, there's a federal holiday in there, and so postal service may be delayed. So if you're not putting a request in the box today or tomorrow, I would hand deliver it. And referendum day is March 4th. A couple quick reminders that tonight is not the only time you can learn more about this opportunity. The City of Decorah hosts this website, which is full of factual information for you to check out. A series of questions and answers are on this page. We want to call particular attention to the task force educational videos. So a lot of folks who have sort of deeper, nerdier questions about how this might work, there are answers in those videos, and we would recommend a listen. And then you can find our work on decoralocalpower.org and on Facebook and Instagram. Just a reminder, we're just people who live in this town who think saying yes and trying to find out more information is a good idea. And we want to help the city get out information about this vote. So thank you all for being here tonight. Let any of us know if you have questions, and we'll look forward to letting you know about other opportunities coming up in the next couple of weeks to learn more. Thank you.